Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking again with Erika Sanzi. Erika is now the Director of Outreach at Parents Defending Education. It's an organization to help parents push back against some of the new diversity initiatives in schools. And diversity is in quotes here. Hi, Erika. Thanks for coming back.
Hey, great to see you. Thanks for having me again.
So yeah, your organization or the organization you're working for, I don't want to say it's yours. How did that come about? Like, I know Oscar Nomani's involved and I know you're involved and I mean, a few other people. Like, was it just concerned parents that got together and it just came out organically, but how did it come about?
Well, our president and founder is Nicole Neely. She goes by Nikki, and she had already started a nonprofit organization a few years ago called Speech First that was totally devoted to higher education and the free speech issues on college campuses, and particular concern, I believe, around these anti-bias response teams that had been put in place. So that was where it started. But then I don't know if you remember that in Evanston, Illinois, the superintendent announced that they were going to decide which students could come back to in-person schooling based on their skin color.
Okay, that's something I missed.
So it was something, I'd have to look it up for exact words, but it was something about how it was going to be determined based on whether or not they belonged to a historically marginalized group.
Okay.
And they got quick pushback because that's obviously against the law. But I think that sparked in her, because she's also from the Chicago area. I think that was, a moment where she saw that, wait a second, we've got a big problem now in K-12, and that was a catalyst. So, as she learned more about what was going on in K-12, and as she's seeing again, like this very concerning increase in activism, in indoctrination, in the use of propaganda, in limiting the free speech of students and staff, not even allowing dissent about obviously open questions and topics about which people can have very different opinions. Compelled speech, which is again also prohibited under the First Amendment. And so voila, here we are. Now we're 5 working mothers who have come to this, sort of in different ways. We're all parents, and some of us are struggling with this, very personally in our children's schools. I'm not one of those people, actually. I am not dealing with the issues that I, read about from parents all over the country every day. Others of us have been on school committees and worked in classrooms. And so, we have like a variety of lenses that we bring to this work. Yeah, so that's how it started. There is, you may have already noticed that predictably outlets like the Washington Post and Education Week, et cetera, have, really worked to paint this corner of being a right-wing group or a conservative group. But that is not the case. We are totally nonpartisan. Those of us working here have a variety of different political beliefs and there's certainly not uniform agreement on really anything between us, except for the fact that what's happening in classrooms right now is alarming. It is often discriminatory. It is damaging to students. It is really divisive. It is destructive. It uses shame on other people's children. And we're committed to doing what we can to help expose what's going on and then empower parents with the tools to, fight these battles in their communities.
Okay. One thing you'd mentioned there, because it's something I've noticed a lot, like, oh, this is just a right-wing group. Now, I noticed this because of the conversation around Islam. So anyone who spoke out against Islam, oh, you're using right-wing talking points. Oh, you're talking like a right-wing person. And there were, there's a guy, Robert Spencer, he has his organization called Jihad Watch. Robert Spencer is right wing, and you know I describe him the same way Michael Malice describes mainstream media. He's factual, but he's not truthful. Okay, like he takes facts. Like this guy actually read the Quran, he read the Hadith, like he's not ignorant, but he twists those around and it makes the conversation harder. Now, it's the same thing here. I see the same thing with this stuff. It's, oh, you're right wing. Oh, you're using right wing talking points. Oh, that's far right. And then I'll equate that to something else. Like and this is just maybe my tinfoil hat theory or whatever. But if you look at some of the work Zach Goldberg did on media, and I think it was part of his PhD dissertation, and it's like the accusations of racism and everything that went up. If you look at media from 2000 on, after 9/11, they made Islamophobia and all that. They said, oh, that's right wing. During the Obama years, it's like, oh, racism is right wing and it's far right, blah, 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 blah. I mean, like things like the Tea Party didn't help. Like I'm not fully absolving the right of any of this, but they made right wing equal to evil. Mm-hmm. So now, because I guess they've overplayed the Nazi thing or whatever, but so that's all they do. Oh, it's just right wing. So automatically that makes you guys the bad guys because they've purposely made right wing evil. And I've seen that happen like from 2000 on. And so I think that's one of the issues here, that it's the corruption of the media that's helping this thing come along.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, I just think about, like, I'm not a person who's really into giving money to candidates. Mm-hmm. I think I've given to 5 candidates in my life. And when I say given, we're not talking like a lot of money here. Like the most I've probably ever given to one is $100. And probably the least I've ever given to someone is like 25. But if I've given to 5 candidates total in my life, and 4 of the 5 were Democrats, it is fascinating to me that I would be, suddenly this right winger. Now, are they leftists? Are they far left people? No. Could somebody make the argument that I maybe am more center to center right? Yes, they could certainly make that argument, but I don't think of people who land there as, again, right winger to me puts somebody kind of very far over into the spectrum. So our president is a self-described libertarian. Free speech is her thing. Her grandparents met in a Japanese internment camp. Right? So this is personal to her. I don't really know what her political philosophy has to do with that. In the case of Asra Nomani, my colleague, she describes herself as a liberal Muslim feminist. Yeah. Yet again, she's now been put in this box of right winger, which is obviously incoherent. Now, clearly it's because when you aren't subscribing to the dominant narrative, then you are the bad guy. And the people who are, telling everyone out there who the bad guys are think that one of the best ways to make you look like a bad guy is to say that you're right wing. Yeah. Okay, fine. I mean, okay, whatever. But again, it's just lazy. It's so lazy. And it's also dishonest in this case because it is so clear that the pushback to what is happening in classrooms, again, around this refusal and movement away from diversity of viewpoint, this compelling speech, this shaming of children, other people's children on the basis of their immutable traits, right? This is not a partisan thing. It is a very bipartisan, cross-racial, cross-class reality that people don't like this.
Yeah. Okay, about that, like, are you able to talk about some of the things you've seen in some of the schools? Like, obviously I don't want you to like name parents or students or anything like that, but if you can talk about some of the things that have been going on in schools, I just want people to, get more of an idea of what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's actually an important question because another thing that happens a lot, not just with our group, but just happens whenever we're talking about, I feel like issues like this, right? Is you're immediately going to get accused of you're just cherry picking these outlier incidents. Mm. You're just cherry picking those, but like this isn't really happening. You've just had to search high and low to find these egregiously bad cases. And again, That's just simply not the truth. Now, are there super fringe crazy things that happen? We see these videos go viral. Yes, those are things that, that a superintendent in a school district would obviously condemn. And so, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about policies, district-wide policies being put in by school boards, supported by superintendents. So it's not. Now, do we occasionally have an issue with a teacher that goes rogue? Yes, we do. And that's partly because we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that rogue teachers can have a big impact and do a lot of damage. But generally speaking, that's really not what we're looking at. So let's talk about some of the examples. Should we start with a really, really egregious one, or should we work our way up?
I'll leave it up to you.
So, fresh in my mind is a situation unraveling right now in a Massachusetts district where Wellesley, Massachusetts is the name of the district. And I'm very sad to report that that is my alma mater. And I also taught there for 4 years from 1998 to 2002. So what happened there recently, I would tell you would be unimaginable to me, at the time that I was there. But they, like many districts, they have I don't know the title exactly, but they have a diversity, equity, inclusion type of director. And districts that have a person in that position increasingly feel the need to comment on every single event happening in the news that could in any way be linked to any of those issues, right? So we'll take the example of the shooting in Atlanta. So the recent shooting in Atlanta at the spa, where I believe there were 6 Asian women victims and 2 non-Asian female victims, if I'm getting it right. Yeah. And the FBI has said that they just don't have evidence that that was a racially motivated shooting. Well, the school districts don't care about that because they've sent out emails and missives, to families and to students using the term hate crime to describe what occurred there. And then they've decided that students who don't live anywhere near Atlanta, who have no connection to this spa, who have no connection to this incident, need time to process the shooting in Atlanta. Right. So we're adding to the plates of students without really knowing. I mean, there's a good chance they didn't really hear about it. Or if they did, they were like, oh, that's really bad. On to the next thing. Right. So in this district, they decided to have a healing event for students and staff to process the events in Atlanta. And the event was for Asians and BIPOC students, but it explicitly wrote in writing with asterisks for emphasis that white identifying students were not allowed to attend.
But isn't that like a Title VII violation, like a Title VII of the Charter of Rights?
I think it's Title VI.
Okay.
It is 100% a violation of federal law. You cannot exclude people based on their race in a public school, for sure. And so, and then they went on to say, if you, a white student, need to process this too, you can talk to your guidance counselor. And if you don't understand why you're not allowed to attend, I can explain. So that would be an egregious case because it is a violation of federal law. There's no gray on this one. Mm-hmm. And so Parents Defending Education recently, I think 2 days ago, we filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights against that school district. Now, people might say, oh, please, that's obviously an outlier. Well, not exactly, because quite a few months ago, I wrote about a school in LA that was segregating families and students based on their, immutable traits or, I never know where to put certain characteristics, right? So if you're having a special group just for people who identify as LGBTQ, I don't know if we're calling that an immutable trait, but it's certainly, again, an social identity that they're using to divide people. we receive a lot of submissions from schools that say that their children are being divided during the school day, separated during the school day, not every day, right? But they have these events or they have these special days where they separate children by their race during the school day.
Okay, I mean, that's okay. Like I read about the Dalton School in New York City. So that was, I think, 2015. I don't know if it was because the name, I hear Dalton School and I hear Fieldstone Academy. I don't know if it's the same thing or if it's all in one building and it's different schools. But in 2015, they sent letters home to their parents and they said, we'd like you to tell us what race your child identifies at. And this was also because there was a lot of mixed race kids. And they didn't know where to put them. 45 minutes a week, they divided kids starting as young as third grade. So it was a K through 8 school. And so from third grade to 8th grade, they divided kids up by race. They sat the white kids down and they told them how they were oppressors and how they've oppressed everyone and everything is their fault. And then all the other kids, so if it was black kids, they talk about how they'd been oppressed by the whites. And then they talked about the achievements of black people in the US, which that's good. I have no issue with that. Like that part's fine. But after a few weeks or maybe a couple of months, the white kids started spouting off white supremacist rhetoric because they were told that they were evil. And I mean, you split these kids up by race. And the school since then they've had kids taunting each other in the hallways because of racism. Racism has grown in that school. Now, okay, just if you have that as an example, why would other schools start doing the same thing? Like it's, is it like, real realism has never been tried or real race essentialism has never been tried? Like real Marxism has never been tried? Like, is that kind of thing or?
Well, it does. I mean, no, it really does. I mean, we have a legal framework in place precisely to ensure that black and white people could drink from the same water fountain and sit at the same lunch counter and sit wherever they wanted on the bus, right? Mm-hmm. And it's almost as if Irshad Manji says this, so I want to give her credit. Irshad Manji, who is the founder of Moral Courage Project and actually now has a K-12 program called Moral Courage Ed. But she says that it's not the what, it's the how, right? And so she says, when you use those same tactics of division to solve the problem, you're actually duplicating the very problem you claim you're trying to solve.
Yeah. I mean, I don't get how dividing kids by race and setting them against each other, that's basically what they're doing, is going to help anything. Like,
it's well, and you can make the case for anything, right? Like we are very focused on race these days because that just is what seems to be getting the most attention, because that seems to be where schools are putting the most attention. But we see the same thing happening around this gender issue, right? Mm-hmm. That a male student is taught very young. Again, not all schools are doing this, but it is common enough for them to be taught, that they as males are part of this oppressor class. And their sisters are being told that being born female in the United States of America puts them in an oppressed class. Now, when you ask, well, could you just tell me, just one right that females in the United States don't have that males do? There is obviously, they can answer that question because there isn't one.
Yeah, they'll bring up the pay gap and things like that. And then, if you actually
and even, right. So it'll be a couple articles on the pay gap, maybe from Vox or Huffington Post. And the reality is, like, people should talk about and look at the pay gap and look at the different numbers and how they measure it. But they also need to know that boys are being left in the dust by their sisters on almost every single measure we have. Or they need to know that the life expectancy of males is going down. It is now 5 years less than women. They need to know that males commit suicide at a much higher rate. Now, there's other metrics that they need to look at that could, I suppose, bolster the case, right? That America is a patriarchy. My problem is that if you don't give kids all the information and all the measures and all the metrics, and then say to them, what do you think? Do you think that being a woman in the United States makes you oppressed? Or do you think that we live in a patriarchy? Okay, fine. Have the conversation, have the debate, make them strong enough that they could actually debate either side. But instead it's immediate. Oh, you're a male. You go on you're on the oppressor side. Oh, you're heterosexual, and I'm asking you, my students, my middle school students, about their sexual orientation. So I've already crossed major boundaries. And then we're going to also tell you, oh, and because you're heterosexual, you're an oppressor as well. And so it goes down the list, and it gets all tangled up, of course, because people like to say these things intersect, and that makes it really difficult for any of this to make any sense, because it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. About that, like with the kids and all that, but just like I saw some of the videos of Asra Nomani giving testimony, or I don't know if it's called testimony or whatever, but it was at the school board. She was speaking there.
Yeah. So that would be public testimony. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the way the school board reacted to her, is that common for parents? Like, are the school boards and like PTAs and things like that getting more and more hostile towards parents? Like, what's going on with that?
I mean, again, I would say it depends, but certainly common, and especially for someone like Asra, because Asra is a person who has spoken out for a long time. So that as soon as she's ready to speak, a lot of people on that board have already decided they don't like what she said, what she's going to say. Before they hear it, they don't like what she's going to say, right? And because she's an investigative journalist who is really digging deep, and getting and exposing information that makes them look so bad, of course they don't like her. But the point is, that's still unacceptable. Treating her that way is not acceptable. We've seen recently in multiple cases, you have a parent practically bearing their soul, right? Which, by the way, takes courage. It's not nothing to get up in front of a school board and to speak on issues that are highly contentious, highly emotional, and will likely get you called really ugly names. So then to have the board, fixating on the fact that your mask fell below your nose, rather than responding to what it is that you're saying. I mean, I used to be kind of one of those gadflies that was at the school committee meetings, at the podium, every single meeting, like, being a major pain in the ass of the school committee. I can admit that, but you do it because you feel like change is needed, and you feel like people need to know what's going on. And you, as a person who has, if you have the temperament to do it, and your skin is thick enough to do it, and you have the information and the passion, and what's interesting is I feel that this has galvanized people. There's a lot of people going to those microphones that have never done that before. And they're also, again, seeing the disrespect that can come in their direction when they choose to do that. Now, it's not everywhere. There's plenty of school committee meetings happening every single week where people are being treated perfectly fine. So I don't want to broad brush it, but what happened to Asra Nomani and the way she was treated is not an outlier either.
Like, kind of sticking with this a little bit. Well, kind of not, I just to say stick with this, but something you'd mentioned earlier, like about boys falling behind. But when you look at the statistics, I think it's like 66% can't read at grade level. And that's like all students, right? I think it's higher for math. I think it's only like about 20% of kids can do math at a grade level. So when you see that, and then now there's push in Virginia, I think New York, California, Oregon, Washington, to get rid of standards, to get rid of the SAT, to get rid of the advanced placement tracks. How can the school justify that when they can't even teach kids basic reading and maths?
Yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question. I'm always fascinated at how little the activists pushing some of what you just described seem to actually care about student achievement, and how they almost are. It's like they almost excellence is not on the menu. It doesn't seem. I don't know equity has become a word that is so confusing to people intentionally. And some districts are explicit enough where they'll literally put on their website and in their materials that their goal is to ensure equitable outcomes. Now, we can't even achieve equitable outcomes for people who grow up in the same house, go to the same schools, have the same parents, right? So the idea that equitable outcomes is even remotely a realistic goal is insanity, partly because humans are born with unique gifts and talents. So, to have put me, not a strong math student, into the class with the kids that were high flyers in math and could have really achieved a lot and maybe gone on to become who knows what, an astronaut or some job where that requires a lot of math. If they had jumbled me in with them, they would not have been able to get as far because I would have slowed them down. And it's not woe is me. It's a, let's be honest, right? Like, my natural gifts weren't in math. I didn't fail it. I wasn't getting D's. But an accelerated track for math would not have been the right thing for me. But if you had forced all of the superstar math kids to be in my class, all through middle school and up till, 11th grade, they would have been sitting there at their desks reading an independent reading book, bored because they understood this concept 10 days ago and Sanzi's still trying to get it.
But yeah, like this stuff, I mean, like that, like this is what I don't understand. It's just, okay, kids are failing, kids aren't doing well. So,
18, can I say something too? 18% of black boys in the 8th grade read on grade level. 18%. Okay. And yet when we hear talk about all of this stuff related to race and racism and whiteness and all these other words, right? No one is talking about the fact that only 18% of black boys in 8th grade can read on grade level. That's just like a minor, like, oh yeah, as if all this performative bullshit is in all these hashtags and all these BLM flags flying in schools are going to do a damn thing about the fact that those boys can't read, and that the correlation between knowing how to read and not ending up in prison and having a really great life where you can become the best version of yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Where's the attention on that? No, there's none, because that's substance.
Has anyone even asked them, like, okay, great, you're putting all these curriculums, even like without even discussing what's in the curriculum. If the kids can't read, how the hell are they supposed to read the books of these curriculums?
But isn't that the beauty of indoctrination, right? We tell you, you don't need to be able to read these materials because we're going to tell you. That's why you hear so much regurgitation of terms. Mm-hmm. That if you actually were to say, okay, let's wait a second. Let's go through all these words you just used and tell me what they mean. A lot of the kids can't do that. It's the same thing when students used to wear stickers around, that they were against charter schools and against school choice. So you ask one of them a simple question about a charter school. They have no idea what it is. Some grown-up told them to wear that sticker. So it's very similar to that, right? It's grown-ups telling them, deciding what the truth is for them, deciding what they need to think, believe, and then propagate in the name of social justice, racial justice. And while I really do believe that a lot of people that are, falling victim to this almost feels like a cult, if I'm being honest, have good intentions. They think they're doing the right thing. How could they not be in favor of diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism? But the problem is that when people redefine terms, you're no longer, the words that you think you're subscribing to no longer mean what you thought they meant, at least not in the eyes of the people that are spending the money and bringing the programs into the schools.
Okay, on that, because I wanted to speak to you about that, because I've been seeing it a lot online lately. And okay, so I think I mentioned this to you before, but like I spent close to 18 months reading pretty much nothing but critical race theory. And I'm going to call it all collectively critical race theory, and I can tie it all together. But, you know, I read some gender stuff as well and queer theory, but it was mainly just critical race theory. Now, the pushback now, like a lot of it, oh, there's no critical race theory in schools. And so that's why I've been like kind of specifically saying, you know, critical race theory based education or critical race theory based curriculum. It's the same way I would equate it to if you had intelligent design in schools. That's not Christianity, but that's Christian based curriculum. So that's what this stuff is. So like that pushback now, because you can't define this stuff, right? Like, oh, you're pushing back against diversity. But when you try to tell someone, like, you know what, if you had 50 people on a panel of 50 different racial identities and whatever, but you had one straight white person, that would be less diverse than a panel of like 50 black people or 50 Asian people or 50, you know, Indian people, whatever. Because as soon as you put one white person on it, they say the whiteness has taken over everything. So like that pushback that you're like, that's coming now that, oh, this is not CRT. Oh, this is not this. Like, how can, like, I mean, I'm assuming you're trying to get help parents understand what some of this stuff is. So when a parent goes into, you know, let's say they go on your website, and I know there's also FAIR, like,
the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism.
Yeah. And there's a couple other little things starting up for parents in school, you know, like when a parent goes up and, oh, you're using critical race theory, this and that, like, is that one of the things you're trying to help with parents, is like how to push back and how to use correct terminology? Because I mean, it's easy for these people to say, oh, that's not critical race theory. And yeah, okay, technically Robin DiAngelo is not critical race theory. It's whiteness studies. But that is an offshoot of critical race theory. It's like saying Mormonism has nothing to do with Christianity. Yeah, whatever, you know, he's got, it's different prophecies, and you got the stupid planet you get to go to after you die and all that, which is not Christian, but it's based on Christianity. And like I said, like the intelligent design is based on Christianity. So how do you help parents navigate that kind of stuff? Because no one has the time like I did to spend 18 months reading this garbage.
Well, that's a really important point. And again, the activists who are, you know, pushing this into schools and onto schools, they are relying on the fact that people don't have time to read it. You know, they're relying on the fact that they don't have time to read it. And they're also relying on the fact that if they dissent a little and immediately get, you know, crushed with accusations of being white supremacists, you know, that a lot of people will say, okay, like, I'm done speaking out. Like, someone else can do that. I think it's really important to make the distinction between what something's called and what actions and practices are occurring in the school building with kids. You know what I'm saying? I feel like this new arguing over terms is also in some ways not a super productive conversation, simply because at the end of the day, we want to know what you're doing with kids. So you can call it whatever you want to call it. But if you're dividing children up by race, if you're forcing biracial children who have one white parent to go into the group with the BIPOC kids after they already, you know, they have to pick one, you know, they go over to the white group, they're instructed, demanded that they go over to the other group, and then told they need to understand that they can never feel totally comfortable around white people. I don't give a crap. I don't care what they call that, right? And so if we go through all these things, if you're using this oppressed frame, if you're using shame to denigrate children on the basis of their immutable traits, what you're doing is wrong. And then we can kind of get away from, well, this isn't really critical, because the truth is you can read books on critical race theory And then other people will tell you, well, that's not critical race theory. You can pull passages out of books by people who are literally considered to be critical race theorists.
Yeah.
And the response you'll get is, well, that's not critical race theory. Or you'll get the whole, well, that's the theory, but that's not the way it's used in practice. I mean, it's a stupid, it's become an exercise in futility, right? Because again, what the Wellesley Public Schools did, I don't know, where that emanated from necessarily, what it's called. I know that they broke the law.
Yeah. But okay, again, that's very similar to Islam. Okay, to become a Muslim, you just have to say it's called a shahada. You just say, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. You say that in Arabic and you do it in front of a couple of witnesses, you're a Muslim. Like, that's all it takes. But as soon as someone leaves Islam or starts questioning it or wants to reform it, oh, you don't know enough. You didn't read enough. Oh, go speak to this mullah. Go speak to this imam. It's the same thing.
No, right? You didn't do the work.
Yeah.
And don't ask me to do it for you. I'm not going to do the work for you.
Yeah. But it's like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm not saying I've read everything about critical race theory. Like, I spent 18 months reading this stuff. Like I started with Derek Bell and I worked my way down to Kendi and D'Angelo. Like, I did the work, I mean, the amount of papers I read, and some of this stuff is mind numbing. I mean, and it's horrific. Like, I read one, and I'm trying to find it again just so I could post it online, but it was saying that the slaves that were brought over to the United States, because their labor helped the colonizers, the slaves were complicit in the genocide of the natives. Now, who does that help? Now, but so it's the same kind of religious bullshit. It's like I said, it is a cult, and they use the same tactics as any fundamentalist religion when you're discussing against it. So, like, that drives me crazy. But one of the things, like, I was wanting to ask you about, because I've seen this a couple of times, and I've seen it not necessarily in schools, but I've seen it around colleges, and I've heard about it in schools, but I haven't seen anything definitive. So, like, in colleges and stuff, there's a coach, I think 20 years earlier, his father had said something racist, so the coach got fired. There was another one, I think it was in Toronto, it was a Middle Eastern man. His daughter made some comment disparaging BLM. So they attacked the guy's business. Now, I've heard about things where parents have said something in a meeting, and then their kids in school are being singled out by teachers. I mean, again, that's something that Muslim countries do. They'll attack your family because you're in like, there's a woman, Masi Alinejad. She's amazing. She speaks out against Iran. Her brother got imprisoned. Her sister-in-law got harassed.
Yes, I follow her. Yes, I follow her.
Yeah. I mean, it happens in China where dissidents outside of China speak, and then their family in China gets attacked. Like, I don't know if that's common or if that's happening, or if, like, have you heard about things like that? Or
I mean, there's no question that retaliation and retribution are one of the fears that keep parents from speaking out, especially if they've had experience where, they did and something happened. Mm-hmm. I'm not comfortable saying that that's the norm, but it is certainly true, because again, these are human beings, and human beings behave in lots of ways, including lots of really bad ways. I mean, we're seeing parents who question down in Loudoun County. We saw parents that were questioning what was happening, being, put on a list, and people were supposed to go harass them at their homes. So it's certainly, I mean, I've even seen, little dumb things. I can remember, I think when I was on school committee or something, it was like, some trip, maybe it was like a French trip doesn't happen or doesn't get approved. So then the kid of the school committee member who's in the French class the next day is basically told in front of the whole class, it's your dad's fault that we don't get to go. I mean, teachers have always done, made those kinds of mistakes. Now, that's a kind of a less serious topic, but it's the same concept. But the thing is, retribution actually is also against the law. So, people need to be really careful about what they're doing with that. Because another thing that has come up, and here's another little story that I'll tell about an anecdote from a parent, is that, a student spoke up in a class, because the whole Black Lives Matter thing has become such a difficult challenge, because there's so many people who just think that it's those three words and it just means those three words. And of course they embrace that, but they're not familiar at all with the organization, the ideological movement, the tenets of Black Lives Matter, what it is that they call for, their opinions on anything from, what's happening right now with Israel and Palestine versus their views on capitalism versus their views on the nuclear family. They just don't know. So they hear three words that they, of course, believe to be true. And they think, of course, I want to, why wouldn't I want to subscribe to that? Wear the t-shirt, put the sign in my yard, why wouldn't I want my kid's school to hang the banner at the entrance? So that has brought up another problem, because for kids in schools who do know about much more about this and who have the courage to dissent and to say something in class like, of course I believe that those three words, but I really feel like the way it's being used here is much more about the organization and I don't agree with XYZ. Well, that can be a social death sentence for a kid, because in this case, girl dissents about BLM in a health class, word gets out. Next thing you know, she's being followed to the bus, harassed, yelled at, videotaped, and bullied on video, with someone yelling at her using all the language. Again, like do middle schoolers know all this jargon when they're yelling it at the evildoer, or are they just regurgitating what they've heard? Now friends have decided they can't be friends with her because if I'm friends with you, they're sending texts that we've seen. If I'm friends with you, people think I'm racist, so I can't be your friend anymore. And then the school says something like, and again, there were witnesses in the room. This is what they're saying. I don't have it in writing, so I need to put out there, like, maybe this didn't happen, but this is the mother's version of the story, is that when she said, here's the bullying harassment policy, clearly what just happened to my daughter, this applies. The answer was, well, it doesn't apply to your daughter because she's not part of a marginalized group. She has left the school and she's going to do remote learning the rest of the year, and she's going to go to a different school next year.
Okay, but you're not part of a marginalized group. I mean, like, I'm sorry, the bullying thing. The fact that bullying and harassment policies, I mean, those policies apply to everyone equally. That's what they are. They're in the student handbook that everybody signs off on, not just some people sign off on it. Now, it could be that person spoke out, made a mistake. I'm guessing they probably did make a mistake. Maybe they misunderstood something. Maybe they got way over their skis. But the fact that anybody would think anything even remotely like that when somebody is being, swarmed and then harassed on the bus. And by the way, let's remember, all she did was express an opinion that a huge number of people in this country also hold. Yeah. But I mean, like, that's one of this stuff with this thing. And I keep bringing up this book, but I don't know if you read it, Kindly Inquisitors by Jonathan Rauch.
I don't think I've read that book.
Okay. I mean, he's got a new one coming out, but I recommend everyone read this book, because he talks about the threats to liberal science. I mean, what he calls, like, what we call liberal values, he calls liberal science. And he says, there's the fundamentalist threat, which he was talking about the Christian right, and he was talking about some fundamentalist Muslims in the late 80s and stuff. The book came out in like 92 or 93. So against rock and roll, against heavy metal, against rap and all that stuff. Like, then there was what he called the humanitarian threat. And he started talking, and he's showing examples from the 90s in colleges where, oh, that speech might harm students, or that speech is racist, we have to ban it. And so like, why are you against diversity? They changed the meaning of diversity, like, Black Lives Matter. Like, they use these nice words, but they're using, I mean, like, this is what I think is the most insidious part of this. They're using people's good intentions against them.
Correct. That is exactly right.
And I mean, for a lack of a better term, it's evil.
They are that's exactly right. And people are getting tripped up too. Like, then they start to second guess themselves. Then they start to wonder, am I crazy? Then they start to, they suddenly are feeling an unease in themselves because of what they're being told about themselves by people who don't know them. They know nothing about them, except their, again, the boxes that they check about their race and their gender and their nation of origin and their sexual orientation and whether or not they identify, with their biological sex.
I mean, it's ridiculous that they do this. I'm seeing this, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time we talked, but it was with this racial stuff and the dividing and all that. A friend of mine, he wrote this in Medium, and he was talking about his two sons, and he's white. His wife is, I think she's Chinese, but whatever, she's Asian. So his kids are, mixed race, and these are young kids. They're not. I'm going to get it wrong, but I think he said when he wrote it, they were like in third or fourth grade, something around there. And one of the kids came home, and this is only a couple of years ago. He came home and said, "Oh, I wish I wasn't half white."
Oh, we're hearing this. This is,
okay.
You have no idea how much this is happening.
But I mean, you're screwing up kids. Like this is gonna like I have a friend he's a counselor in the UK. I think he finally he finished his therapist license, but he used to be a counselor now. But he'll have people come in and say, "Okay, I've got anxiety because I lost my job." Things where. But he said he was starting seeing more and more people come in their 20s who said, "I have anxiety because I'm white."
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not making for a healthy population. This is not making and the counter side of this. During right after the George Floyd killing, and there was all the protests and the riots and whatever. Got to keep those two things separate. But okay, there was one. It was a picture of a girl in the UK, and she looks to be about 6 years old, and she's holding up a sign that points toward that says "Privilege" and "Black Lives Matter."
Oh, I saw that. Yes.
Okay, to me that was disgusting. But there was another one where it was a young black boy, maybe 10 or 11. I can't tell kids' age, but he was playing in his front yard or in his driveway or something, and then a cop's come by, a cop car drives by, and the kid starts crying and runs to hide, and he said, "They're going to come and kill me."
Yep.
Now I'm just, okay, and whatever, but that kid has more of a chance to be killed by another black person than he does by a cop. That level of fear and anxiety being pushed on little children. I mean, I know people say, "Oh, kids are resilient and all that," but I'm sorry, but that is not going to make for healthy adults. It's not going to make for a healthy society. Again, don't the schools think of these things, or are they just going along with what's popular?
I think what happens is, when you're not sure if you want to get on a ride, maybe an amusement park, which for me is all rides, right?
Even a carousel,
or maybe you think you really want to get on it. It looks really good, whatever. And then suddenly you realize, oh my God, what did I do? I think that's happening right now in a lot of places, because not only in schools, by the way, I mean, corporations, nonprofits, but also K-12 schools where there was pressure. You have to do something. And then waiting in the wings were all of these diversity, equity, inclusion consultants and these big, highly profitable consultants, companies, organizations, whatever they are, that were ready to sort of fill that need that suddenly everybody had. Some had it because their board of directors was like, "You need to do," you know what I mean? It was coming from all these different directions. And so they grabbed something from the shelf. That sounds great. How could it not be? Diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism. This is amazing, right? Not realizing, again, getting back to that, it's not the what, it's the how, that what they had spent a lot of other people's money on was going to destroy them from within. Chloe Valdry, who you probably follow, who has the Theory of Enchantment program, which she kind of calls, it's an alternative way to do anti-racism. And she uses anti-racism in the old version, not the new version. But she said on a podcast that I watched that her business was blowing up because she said CEOs and presidents of nonprofits, they all reached for the shiny solution, not knowing what it was, or they handed off they delegated the task and that person grabbed something. And she said they're now coming to her saying, our organization has completely fallen apart at the seams. We have collapsed because of what we brought in. Can you help us put ourselves back together? So it's an acknowledgement. So when you do this work, like an Irshad Manji or a Chloe Valdery, you're acknowledging the reality of these very real problems, right? Racism, injustice. But you decide that you refuse to duplicate the terrible things that happened in our past. You refuse to duplicate them in search of a solution, right? So you say, I'm not going to shame people. I'm not going to denigrate people. I'm not going to judge people based on their immutable characteristics, right? We're going to do it differently to find more common understanding. Because the reality is schools are going to have to at some point acknowledge they are now in the dehumanization business. And there is nothing more dangerous than dehumanization, right? Because as soon as you convince yourself, whether, I think it's a subconscious process that happens, which makes it really scary, right? As soon as you convince yourself that a fellow human is less than, is an other, isn't fully human, well, now you can justify all sorts of things.
Yep.
And I truly believe that some of what we are seeing coming in from parents and from staff and from grandparents and just concerned people in the community, it is dehumanization.
Yeah, it's sick. Look, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I just got a couple last questions for you. One is, like, you mentioned, getting these, diversity counselors and whatever coming in. Like, I see how much these people are getting paid.
Big jobs, very big jobs.
Okay, but then I look at this. This teacher I'd spoken to from Texas a couple of years ago. She started this thing called Clear the List and Donors Choose. Mm-hmm. And it's basically like teachers put up Amazon wish lists and they need things for their classrooms and parents buy them. Even when I was a kid, teachers would spend some money out of pocket for, like little gold stars and things like that. Right. But now I'm seeing things like pencil sharpeners, cleaning supplies. I'm like, okay, America, whatever you want to say, like the richest country in the world. You can't put pencil sharpeners in the school, but they're spending, $20,000 an hour on Ibram Kendi.
These jobs tend to pay over 100,000. Yeah. And that doesn't even include the fees paid to these guests that come in and the materials. I mean, I believe that Asra Nomani just revealed recently a $424,000 expenditure on something related to this. This is very big money. And that is a huge piece of all this, by the way, right? Like, we can't pretend that this is not big business. And, and it's not there's anything wrong with profit as a motive. That's nothing, these people are running a business. My argument would be you're paying for something that's absolutely terrible, that's psychologically and emotionally damaging your children. And, oh, by the way, people will say, oh, look how much they care about the white kids. I mean, all the kids. When an African-American grandfather got up the other day and spoke at a public meeting, he spoke about how what was happening in the district, and I'm blanking right now on the name of the district, which is driving me crazy, but he spoke on the fact that it was crippling all the kids. Because he said, you're crippling them in different ways. You're teaching my people who look like my grandson that it's hopeless to be Black in America, that no matter what he does, the system is against him, that he can't get ahead. And that all these values we instilled in him, that suddenly you've decided to teach him that these are white values. So you have that, right? Which is, adding to that, how healthy is it to teach kids resentment, bitterness, and what appears to be turning into hatred? And then you're also crippling students who feel like oh my God, I was born a racist. My school told me I was born a racist and there's nothing I can do about it. My school told me that I'm complicit in all the terrible things that were done by this country. You know, my school told me that even though I'm white, I shouldn't embrace my whiteness. So this is, again, so now you've crippled these kids who literally feel shame as if they were born with the original sin of being born with less melanin in their skin, right?
Yeah.
Add to that the complete, nightmare they've created for biracial and multiracial children, which is a very large number of students. And what their families did, what they did by integrating, becoming an integrated family and all of the, beauty and progress that shows, right? They're literally seeing it being almost what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like spoken about in school like it's a bad thing. And they're now telling exact words. Students, again, this is some schools, obviously not all schools. Biracial Billy, you can never truly be yourself around the white members of your family because your skin is brown.
Yeah, I mean it's awful.
I mean, they're so out of bounds and so out of their lane. And what's funny is they'll talk till they're blue in the face about social emotional learning. Well, I'm really done hearing them talk about that because you're gonna abuse children psychologically and emotionally, and you're gonna call that social emotional learning. I mean, what? And let's fast forward this. What happens when kids really take what they're being told seriously, right? And they can't just shake it off. There are kids who are going to shake this off. They're either going to rebel or they're just going to blow it off, right?
Or they're going to, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say, like, if it's a white kid, oh, I was born racist, there's nothing I can do about it. They might be one of those assholes down in Charlottesville marching with a tiki torch.
Yeah, kind of like, well, this is who you told me I am.
Yeah.
So then you have the kids who are going to soak, they are eating this up. They are soaking up every single word. They are literally taking in, no matter what I do, I can never get ahead. Everyone in the country hates me. The police hate me. My white teammates hate me. My white coaches hate me. My white teachers hate me, right? Yeah. And then you have the white kid who's saying, no matter what I do, there's evil inside me because I was born white. You fast forward, right? If you play that out, that could end very badly.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be awful. I just I've always, since I came back from overseas, what I've always said was what the left is doing is an overcorrection and I'm scared of it. But when the overcorrection from the right comes, I'm terrified of that. That's
and I agree. I feel the same way. Glenn Lowry, professor at Brown, has talked about this, that he feels that this is very dangerous territory because he says you can tell people these things and they can deal with it to a point. Yeah. But then the dam breaks. Yep. And I keep thinking about, because I don't know why I have this visual, but I just do, right? When you're out and about and you see the guys in the hard hats, right? And they're up in the buckets, fixing all of our problems that we would never know how to fix. At least I wouldn't, obviously. And then you've got the guys jackhammering in the hard hats, and they're in their beating sun, and there's a porta potty on the sidewalk because that's their bathroom for the day, and then in their and they, by the way, they're working class guys who are actually quite racially fluent because they work around guys from, all different backgrounds. And so they don't know all these stupid fancy words that mean nothing, but when it hits them, when suddenly people are telling them that they need to use these words, or they're talking to them about microaggressions, or they're telling them, these guys who are volunteering on the weekends to coach kids to do all sorts of things, you're going to tell them they need to reflect on their whiteness. I'm just not sure how that's going to go. I don't feel like that's going to go well.
Oh yeah, no, it's not going to end well at all. Okay, one last thing before I let you go, because I know you got a lot of stuff to do. On the Parents Defending Education website, like what resources, like if a parent goes there right now and they're trying to push back, like, are you guys putting up resources, or are you just documenting cases and stuff like that that's going on? Like,
So we are doing all of those things, right? So if somebody was like, oh my gosh, this thing is happening in my school. I can't believe this email I just got. I can't believe this assignment my kid just had. I can't believe this, whatever. They can go to our website and they can submit a report. I think it says something like have a tip or something. They can submit a report. They can remain anonymous. Most people do choose to remain anonymous. And then we look into it, and if it rises to the level of something we want to investigate further, it's obviously helpful. The more documentation they send us, the less work it is for us. So that's one thing that we do. And I would put that in the category of expose, right? Like we expose things that are happening. But we also provide a lot of resources on our website to help parents who want to better understand what's going on, and also who want to, learn how to lift their voices and speak out against their concerns. So, and I always feel like the first step is that one of the most important things that we do is we help parents realize they're not crazy. Then we have guides, or we have suggestions on our website about what questions to ask the principal. We have suggestions about how to prepare to attend a school board meeting and speak at a school board meeting. We have something called Understanding Woke Jargon, which is just, parents will say, I've never heard these words in my life, and suddenly I feel like I get an email every day loaded up with these words. What are they talking about? Okay, well, we can give them, a guide as to what those words mean. We teach people how to file Freedom of Information Act requests. Now, if your kid is in a private school, you don't really have that. You've kind of given up some of your rights, and so you can't file these complaints with Office of Civil Rights or for Freedom of Information. But either way, we teach people how to do that, and we also do it for them. So sometimes it's as simple as we figure out what's going on in a district and we file it. But some parents want to do that on their own, so they can learn how to do that from us. We have all sorts of parents groups up on our site so that people can look to see, wow, I feel like I'm on an island. Is there anybody else who maybe thinks what I think or feels what I feel? Oh, look, there's actually a group already started in my state or in my county or in my city. And then we have lots of alternative resources, including for them to suggest to their school districts, right? So you don't want to only be against something, and it's not really a strong position. So if you can say, we really do believe that a lot of the problems you're trying to address are very real problems. And we really do believe that it's important that students learn, a brutally true version of the nation's history, right? Yep. But the way that that's occurring seems to be actually having a really damaging impact, probably actually is getting you the opposite of what you were hoping for. Here are some alternatives, and there are also alternatives around curriculum, let's say around social studies or history, maybe, articles to read about people who are speaking out about this stuff. And then we have alternative curricula for diversity, equity, and inclusion work, so that somebody can say, the thing you're doing with the shame and the denigration and what appears to be CRT-based or critical theory-based, here's something that seems like it might be a much better alternative. Would you consider looking into this?
Okay, that sounds great. So if you want to let parents know where they can get a hold of you, get a hold of the website, if they have any questions or whatever, at least they can go to the website. They'll have some resources.
So the website is defendinged.org. And my email, if they want to reach out to me directly, is Erika@defendinged.org. Erika with a K @defendinged.org. And again, if they go to the website, if they want to report something, they can. If they're just curious to see what incidents are already up on the map, in their area or in their state, they can check that out. They can scroll through all of our, all of the different resources on our pages. I'm quite positive that there are some I didn't mention, but, and the truth is sometimes it's overwhelming. You're like, okay, I see all your resources. I don't even know where to begin. Can you help me? Yes, we can help you. So if you email, send in an incident report or reach out to us through that form or send an email to me, we can offer, I mean, we can hop on the phone. We do it all the time. We can do all sorts of things. If you have a small group of people, that's a group that's forming and you want some advice on how to get that started, we have a director of advocacy that gets on Zooms with groups all the time. So again, it really depends on what people need. But our goal is to do whatever we can to expose what's going on, empower parents with what they need, and then for them to be able to engage in their communities in a really productive way.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for what you're doing. Because I mean, like I've been watching this, and I'm like, this is not going to end up well, and it needs to be pushed back on. So it's great.
Well, I'm honored to be able to do the work. Thank you so much for having me. It is always a treat to see your face. I guess people are just going to be listening to us, but they don't know that we've been looking at each other while we've been talking. So, you know, stay in touch with us, and hopefully maybe we can come back and give you an update once we've, you know, been doing this for a little bit longer.
Oh, for sure. Anyways, thanks again. And thanks everyone for listening. I'll be back.